Welcome to Normalizing PTSD. Today, before we start the episode, I just want to touch on a few things. One, taking constructive feedback. I hear that there's some acronyms going on out there that maybe not everyone knows. We'll start with the most obvious one, EOD. EOD is Explosive Ordnance Disposal. Just my career that I started in the military. It's my MOS. So a lot of listeners and support know who that is, but a lot of you don't. As well as this isn't an EOD PTSD podcast. This is just the organization of the group that I'm closest to. So it's easier to get people. I know a lot of people in this career field, and slowly branching out and getting some others that, I got a couple of police officers coming in, and the more I learn, the more connections that I get, the more variety that we'll all get as a group. So the overall goal of this podcast is just to reach out and get more information. Like I'm kind of hungry for information for myself. So I just want to share that journey with others because I feel like the more information that we have, the better we are at getting help and helping ourselves with PTSD. Another note is a lot of the guests that are going to come on, like these individuals are going to be at different stages of their journey with PTSD. We might get some that are in the beginning that are still struggling with some of the things that you may have already recovered from or figure out a way to deal with. Let's just be mindful and kind to those people because it's insanely uncomfortable coming on and talking about something that has been demonized so hard in society as well as in our own circles, like seen as weak and stuff like that. So in my opinion, it's the strongest and hardest thing to do. So on that note, we're going to hit it up with Josh. Josh is going to be episode 3 of Suffering Silence, and I love this one. We go deep. We go out into the fringes. Like, he expanded my concept on a few things as well as gave me a bit of an appetite to go dive deep in some other areas. So I hope you enjoy it. And with no further delay, here's Josh.
Well, today we have Josh, and I appreciate you jumping on, brother, and I hope this goes amazing. We're just going to, I guess, start at the beginning. Like, who is Josh? Like, where you come from? What do you do? Like, what led you down, I guess, to the path of wanting to inquire more about PTSD and, like, how to deal with it? Like, what got you to that point?
Yeah, well, thanks for having me on, man. Let's see, who's Josh? Well, I joined the Army kind of right out of high school. I don't know if you did, but I know it seemed like most of our generation kind of didn't spend too much time out of high school, went straight in. So yeah, 18, joined the Army, signed a 5-year contract, and yeah, had a kind of weird 5 years. Like, kind of started off as infantry with a contract to go to airborne school and into special forces qualification course. And so I kind of went through all those and then got about, maybe halfway through the qualification course and got dropped, and kind of had already had a few buddies drop earlier and went EOD, just because the recruiting is really easy in the Army side, especially at Fort Bragg, to get guys in EOD from SF because we already had a clearance and we're in shape and we scored high or whatever on test. So that's how I kind of made my way into EOD. And yeah, spent some time in EOD and did a deployment, and yeah, and then kind of abruptly got out. I was planning on staying in. I got kind of selected for a special missions group and was supposed to kind of continue on for at least another 5 years, and had an interesting moment just in life, like going back home and kind of sitting on a ski lift, and just had a shift and kind of a change of heart, and where I was like, you know what, whatever this is, this feels a lot better than what I'm doing. Right. And yeah, I went back and I didn't sign another contract. I told it, I was like, hey man, I'm done. getting out, and yeah, it was kind of very abrupt. Just boom, I'm out, done, and then not really having a plan.
Right.
Post-military, right? Like most of us. So
Yeah, like
that's kind of what happened. And
I went from in to out, I think, in 2 weeks, and mine was a little bit similar to that, and we can get there for sure. But we're going to walk it back just a little bit. Like, what inspired you to join the military?
Man, so I mean, I think there's layers to that. You have the real basic, maybe storylines of, like I was in high school when 9/11 happened. We all watched that. We all had a reaction, and definitely got swept up in the momentum of that, just because I'm a high school man, like young man, and
Right. I feel like we
the
have a
whole
lot
war
of
thing
emotions,
pops up.
like a lot of emotions as a young adult male for sure. And then that was a very emotional moment for all of us.
Yeah, and then like some males, like we're just wired and primed to step up to like fulfill a hero archetype or a warrior-esque type thing, and if a war shows up and there's like a patriotic movement behind it, it's like some of us, it's impossible not to go, like that. And I think that was me. It was like, oh, okay, this is what I got to do. And I always had an interest in the military. I was wanting to get into the Air Force Academy when I was like around junior high school. I had already had big dreams, like do well academically, get into the Air Force Academy, and fly jets. That was like my young, naive kind of little dream, And then I think when the war kicked off, everything shifted for me, and it was kind of like, hey, if there's going to be like a real war, and there's going to be guys on the ground, boots on the ground, like dying, fighting, I want to be part of that. Not to take away from our fighter pilots or anything, but it was just for some reason I was like, I want to be in the trenches on the ground with the guys, I felt like a responsibility to, if like I said, if all these people are signing up for this effort, I think I would feel weird not doing that,
Yeah, for sure. And then we'll just jump back to the ski lift. So you did the military, you did infantry, and then after that led you to EOD, and then you said you made some further progress in selections and stuff like that, and then you ended up on a ski slope, and then there's a mental shift. At this time, like, would you say that you're already feeling the impacts of some sort of related PTSD issues or something like that? Were you self-aware yet, or did something happen to make you aware of that?
No, so I wasn't, didn't really recognize I had any issues going on. Probably didn't really recognize that and admit it till maybe 3 years after I got out. But while I was in, I think I was my whole 5 years was very high tempo, in terms of training, and obviously you went to or had a deployment or a few as EOD. The tempo being high on deployment, coming back, tempo still high, and then on top of it, I was kind of volunteering for selections, and these selection processes are extremely stressful, right, for a reason. And I think I just fried my system in a short 5 years. And I think when I was on that ski lift, I didn't know it, but my nervous system had experienced some calm, because, and then everyone kind of has something that does it for them. Maybe some people want to sit on the beach, and just stare off, or, some people have that visceral response to different kind of environments. And for me, just being up in the mountains skiing with a good friend, I think it was the first time in a long time my nervous system had like calmed down, and I had actually enjoyed something simple, versus just go, 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 high adrenaline, high cortisol, high stress life that I was living, you know.
Right.
So I didn't know what was happening, but I just knew, oh shit, it was enough for me to leave where I was at, which was like a very special place to be. Like, at least what I thought at the time, you know, like I tried out for a special missions unit, really with the idea that I was not going to get selected for that. It was kind of a Hail Mary before I left the Army. I was like, well, I might as well. And I got selected, and just didn't expect it. But I just think, coming back from that life into something calm and simple just shook me. And it was enough to get out of that job and get out of that special missions unit and the Army altogether, you know.
Right. Mine, I feel like went a little bit different. Like, I think I went the opposite spectrum. I started doing things that were so out of character that really was a red flag for me, because I feel like my time in the military, I went from like normal me to like high tempo, high intensity, which was like maybe a more aggressive version of myself. But I didn't see any like there wasn't like a switch and it was like, oh, okay, I turned into a different person. It was almost like a natural progression, and at no point did I feel like I was changing at any level until like I started seeing my level of aggression with people that I really cared about, and I was like, shit, something's changed. So I mean, it's pretty awesome that you found it on the slopes, you know. So once you realized that there was you preferred the more mellow approach, did you started seeing any sort of impacts of I guess the prolonged military tempo, the high tempo, the PTSD related, like, did it still impact your life in any way?
Oh yeah, totally. I mean, I think just, you know, the story of me being on a ski lift and making that really big decision, that was just kind of the start of something. And when I always look back at how everything unfolded, you know, when you look back in hindsight, things are very different than when you were going through it, you know. And so when I look back, I'm like, oh yeah, like this was the start of my unraveling, in a weird way. And so it got much worse later on, you know, as I unraveled. Just more and more stuff started coming out, and yeah, it was just the kickoff to an entire, you know, circus.
So, what you can be as vague or as detailed as you like. I'm to the point now where I'm very comfortable with just sharing whatever. But what are some things that you saw that you were like, okay, these are problems, you know, like, because like my goal is to like have veterans share their experiences so those others that are like listening can be like, oh, okay, I can see relatability to that too. Like I see that in myself, you know, maybe like, hey, these are some signs that maybe you do need to like get some help, and then like maybe touch on like what you did personally that improved the quality of your life.
Right. So I think probably the first thing I recognized was my anger and aggression. And I think I started noticing it before I got out, because I remember I'd go to work every day, and we're doing like 15-hour days and just tons of training, tons of constant running training scenarios or selection processes and all this stuff. And I'd come, and it was fun, like especially mentally stimulating. Like it was a fun place to go every day, you know, like you know, EOD, you know, we get to drive Humvees out in the desert and blow shit up. Or, you know, at this unit we were doing shooting drills, and like you know, I was practicing on Colombian color bombs, you know, and like all of it, right? It's like the shit we signed up to do. And then I'd go home and I'd be fucking pissed, like at dumb stuff. Like I'd cook dinner and I'd mess something up, right? Or I'd drop something, and it would just be an immediate, like, fucking Tourette's style anger outburst,
Right.
you know, with just something simple, you know, like, and I realized, like, oh, how is it that I have, like, my dream job, and then when I come home, I'm alone and miserable, you know? And that was kind of the nature of being in that unit anyway. I just got there, knew nobody, nobody, just totally alone. And then I was the FNG, the fucking new guy. So,
Right.
you're kind of left alone a little bit. Not, it's not like I was treated bad, but it's kind of like, okay, you're the new guy. Let's see if you got what it takes to, be part of the team or whatever. So, it was just a weird realization. I was like, why is this happening? But I didn't really go into it. And then I think after the military, after I got out and started unraveling, it was just lots of anger. And then that turned more mental, maybe, just being angry at all kinds of things that I could figure out to be angry about. Right. And there's an infinite amount of those. And so it probably wasn't until maybe 2012 or so, where I really was like, dude, okay, I am a mess. I'm like, now the anger was starting to turn into rage, and the rage, it's like when it gets to rage point, it's like you're doing everything you can to not let it out, because you don't know what is that going to be. Are you gonna flip out on some dude at the grocery store or in traffic, or how's it going to come out? Because it's like white hot rage. It's like, like wants to kill, like murderous fucking rage, And so once it got to that point, it was like turning into depression, because I wasn't letting it out for fear of, like, how society would react to that, how people would react, how the law would react to that potentially, like. Right. So that turned into depression. And to me, depression was really what broke me. It's like, okay, I don't want to live like this. In fact, I went through probably a few years on and off of suicidal ideation, where I was like, what's the point? If I'm just going to be fucking miserable and angry at everybody, everything, and so, I had all those kind of symptoms. I had, just hypervigilance. I had some sleep issues, and my body was starting to ache and, like, take on all these weird, like, holding patterns, because, I'm stuck in a hypervigilant state all the time. My breathing patterns are off. My diaphragm's messed up, like, blood restriction, cortisol, adrenaline. Like, after a while, those all take, your body takes a beating after a while. In the beginning, those are great drugs. Adrenaline and all the stress hormones, but I started to notice just my body breaking down, my mental health breaking down, and then, getting even existential about it, just whether you want to live or not. And I think at that point it was like, and that's a long period of time. It wasn't just one day I woke up and realized all this was happening, but all those symptoms arose, and kind of had no choice but to start healing,
Right. No, I definitely, you said it pretty awesome there. It didn't, like, take going negative. Like, I feel like the longer you stay in a negative pattern, the worse the negative pattern gets. So it took me years too to get to the point where I was like, Jesus, like, I have to do something, because the only, like, logical next step is to end this, and it has to end whether I do something to change my mental state, or it has to end by checking out. So that's when I got to the point where I was like, I have to be a little bit more aggressive about what I'm doing. But I wanted to circle back on just some of the thoughts. Like, have you reflected back on those negative things and like expounded on those, like, maybe why they were? Like, you made a comment earlier about cooking dinner, and, like, you mess up something minor, yet it would really piss you off. And I used to have that a lot too. And for me, like, when I look back on it, like you look at our training and just the motto of EOD in general, it's initial success or total failure. So it was like, you know, like we were like, it was beat into us like, you can't fuck up, you can't mess up, you know. So I saw
Right.
myself as like I was always at a 10 anyway, you know. I walked around at a 7 or a 10, somewhere around there, like always ready to just engage. So if I messed up something minor, it felt like I messed up something like big and important, you know.
Right.
Just curious if like
And also, I
you
think,
ever felt that way too. Go ahead, sorry.
yeah, definitely. And I think also, especially while we're in and we're actually engaged with, you know, EOD or whatever you're doing in the military, especially if it's like, you know, very demanding. You know, it's like after you get done with work, you know, after you're home or whatever, it's like it's like you can release some of that pressure. Because I remember like I'd be at, you know, I'd be at this like unit doing like high intense training, and not only that, having like the sergeant major sitting there watching you, like a bunch of eyes are on you, and you're trying to, you know, you're working on a circuit board or you're doing X-rays or, you know, you're doing all this cool EOD shit, but honestly, it's super intense because the seriousness of it and like that level of intensity, not even on a deployment, just in the States, was like, yeah, you can't fuck up. And every time you do, it's gonna be pointed out. You might get yelled at. You might get, you know, um, you know, not made fun of. You know, like how we razz each other and stuff. But it's just,
yeah, we had a couple of those.
and I took it right, yeah, but I took it super serious. Like if we were doing IED training, it's like I tried to really imagine, like, hey, this is real. Like, what am I gonna do? Right? Like, this isn't a play scenario. This is potentially going to be real. And so that kind of pressure I put on myself, and then, you know, just the unit putting pressure on you to perform. You get home and it was like, you know, if you mess something up little during a training exercise or something, or on a mission, you're not going to, it's like you don't have the space to just flip the fuck out. And it's not going to be conducive to the team. It's not going to look good. But then when you get home and you drop a glass on the ground and it breaks, and it's like instant, you're like, fuck, you know, like just screaming.
Happens. Yeah, 100%.
Right.
Because I feel like that
level
of attention to detail, we apply it to absolutely everything. It's like, this lawn is going to be perfect, you know, or like we're going to do this perfect to that level. But yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, and I just think, yeah, the being able to release the pressure, I think, is a big part of like kind of PTSD in general, and what we experience. And a lot of times that doesn't happen until you get out of the Army or the Air Force or the Navy, whatever. Right. It's like you get out, and then you're allowed to, like, all right, I'm not gonna hold all this stress in. I'm just gonna let it out. And some of us do that more than others, you know. And then we start having these outbursts, and people around you are like, what the fuck? Like, you just went from 0 to 10.
I did that with my brother, and it still embarrasses me to this day. I came back from one of the deployments to Iraq, and I was filling up my gas tank, and there was some guy in a parking lot, poor soul. He was like, you know, about 70 yards away, and he kept looking at us in the vehicle, you know, and I just like screamed. I'm like, what are you looking at? And my brother's like, chill out, dude. And I'm like, sorry. You know, it was just like outbursts like that. Like, it didn't make sense to me, or it didn't really even hit my radar at the time. I was like, oh, whatever, this is what we're supposed to be like. But now looking back, I'm like, oh my God, like, I can't believe like I acted like that. And I also feel like it has a lot to do with the way the military's set up. Like, we don't really, like, we teach people how to do things like operations, you know, tactical maneuvering, like that level of stuff, but we don't really teach people how to de-escalate their mental state, and like how to walk it back, and like how to get grounded and centered. So I feel like for the whole time that I was in, I was always at that level, like let's get some kind of thing.
Right.
So,
Yep.
what did you start doing, like, once all this was identified and you're like, okay, like, clearly I'm going down a negative path. I don't want to keep going down this path. Like, what are things that you started doing and trying? Like, did you talk to people? Did you reach out to any, like, close friends? Or you're like, I feel like a lot of times, especially in our career field, it was a lot of solo stuff, so a lot of us do things on our own in that career field as well as outside. So, like, what did you start doing?
Right. So I don't know. I guess I'd have to start like when I first got out of the Army. I still like, I didn't consider that I had PTSD or, any of that. And I think I was already starting to question a lot of things, and maybe I started getting a little philosophical and existential with things kind of prior. And I think that was just because that's my personality. Like, I was, kind of naturally drawn to asking deeper questions, about life. I never really had the chance, in the Army, or just going. And for some reason, I just kind of fell into that. And then I think,
if you don't mind, like what kind of exists, like, how deep were we talking? I mean, like, you can share as much as you like or as little as you like. I'm just curious on a personal level. Like,
well, and the only reason I talk about it, yeah, well, I think the reason I bring it up is because, like, now that I'm like where I'm at today, I'm like, wow, I think two things were going on, with me. There was like this existential kind of thing going on. You could say spiritual, whatever. Where I was, asking deep questions and kind of like on this pursuit of truth, whatever that means, right? And I was kind of brutal in that process, kind of like how we are in EOD and the military, in general. Once you have a mission kind of laid out, it's all about, going after it, I guess, like full blast, 100%. And I kind of started doing that in regards to more existential questions, like what's the point of this? Like, what is life? Like, who am I? Like, I was raised in like a pretty deep Christian, not just Christian, like fundamental Baptist Christian. So, so I guess that kind of maybe primed me for that, because it was like that. You could call it programming, conditioning, whatever, that religion provides. Just kind of set me up for failure, I think, for the modern world, and to be able to handle the the paradox of life, and like the fact that things aren't so black and white, like warfare. Like, you start digging into war. Let's just take Iraq, Afghanistan, post 9/11 wars. You start digging into the information. It's not black and white. It's not maybe the story isn't the storyline you maybe had going in. And I think when that gets questioned, people don't like to question those deep-rooted beliefs. And when you do, it can be kind of destabilizing, even for just normal people and with very little trauma. If you uproot your operating system, it's going to be a weird experience, And so I've kind of already been doing that, like basically uprooting my operating system and looking at it and going like, why do I believe the things I believe? Like, and then that kind of bled into politics, geopolitics, and really trying to analyze, all right, why did we go to Iraq? Why did we go to Afghanistan? does it make sense? And I think when you dig into it, it doesn't make sense. That's not to say I know there's no answer, and it's not to say America's bad or evil, because I think if we, especially the veteran community, I know there's kind of a taboo on questioning the whole war in general, questioning the politics, questioning the money, all of it, and like it's going to automatically make you a socialist or a anti-American nut, and it's like I gave myself the freedom to question it regardless, and to kind of go into all this. And I think in that process,
just a quick
go
I
ahead.
just want to just clarify when you're I just want to make sure I'm on the same page when you say that they're religion to the black and white of religion, and then applying that to maybe what we did in the military. The way I took that was basically good guys versus bad guys. It wasn't that simple, right?
Right. Yep.
Yeah.
Good versus bad, but also in a religious sense, it's good versus evil, right?
Exactly.
And
100%.
and now, I mean, I view it all completely different. Like the concepts of good and evil, and like who decides that? Who decides what's true and what's not? And
right.
Collectively, how do we do that? And it's a huge topic, but
it is, and we could spend days on it for sure. Like, I mean, I went kind of similar process with that, and I feel like a lot of my issues from that time frame is like a moral injury, because I didn't and don't agree with some of the things that happened, whether or not it meant big picture, it was for the good, or or for the good side or whatever. It's like it doesn't really matter to me anymore. It's more of like, I wish that didn't happen kind of thing. But I mean, it's your experience. So like, without getting too deep into politics and stuff like that, like how did reflection on those things impact you?
So I think that's what that brought out a lot of the anger, because it almost felt like a sense of betrayal, not like betrayal in terms of like just information, and realizing like the way I was brought up, and I'm not blaming religion or anyone really. It's just a recognition of like, hey, here's the type of person I was, and the fact is like I was a highly conditioned human being in terms of mental conditioning around beliefs,
Right.
whether that was through public education, religion, and then culture, pop culture. It's all some type of, I'm not saying it's done on purpose. It's conditioning. It's just the way we condition ourselves, and I don't know where I was going with that. Sorry, just lost
No,
it.
it's okay. I do that too. I get like deep into a thought and keep turning down different streets until I forget what main street I left on. But we'll bring it back to
Right.
we're basically talking about what led you to seeing it, or what led to your personal internal dialogue that you processed to be like, okay, so what what caused this PTSD? Where does all this pain and aggression stem from? And then that led us to, looking at the military, and basically you're raised religious. So that kind of, I'll use your terminology, conditioned you to have faith-based beliefs as a person, which then you apply to social constructs, which actually, and then it led to like the military construct. Like you have this faith base of like, okay, we're doing good things in the military. That's why we're here for freedom, and here to better the advancement of America. And then you get into it, and then
Right.
afterwards you start looking at it from a really deep level, and then maybe you started seeing it slightly different, and that's where some of this aggression stems from.
Right, and I think they're just phases to go through. Like right now, I don't feel the same I did when I was first maybe digging through information around, let's say, politics and the war, and realizing like, okay, there's a lot of lies being told on all sides. It's just a kind of the nature of warfare is propaganda and manipulation and right? Money making, all that. And I think, yeah, when you explore all that, it's just going to naturally bring up anger and rage and like betrayal, sense of betrayal, like, you know, and it wasn't anyone very, very specifically that did the betraying. It was just like a betrayal of society, you know, and I had to just go through that phase. It's not like I believe that now. I don't see it the same way, but when it was happening, it was like, it's almost like releasing a bunch of whatever's pent up in the body. And the mind, it's almost like the mind has to go exploring different thoughts, different emotions, memories in order to allow the physiology to kind of let go. You know, so I think it was like the mental and existential exploration kind of helped open up more of the stuff locked up in my physiology, my body, you know, and a lot of that was high amounts of anxiety that basically manifested as anger and agitation, you know.
Yeah, I think I went through a similar exploration phase, and for me, I get stuck in loops, and I feel like my PTSD it was a big loop for years, and what I needed to do was to logically rationalize everything that I could, and then once I was able to do a lot of that for my own mind, it kind of like put a lot of it to rest. You know, well, with that aspect of it, I mean, some of the trauma stuff, it's like that's a little bit different for sure. But I mean,
Right.
that's what made me what I thought of when you were saying that right there. So once you got past I guess, the process of rationalizing it all for yourself, like what kind of things did you do to like de-escalate the aggression or that intensity?
So I mean, I did a lot of things, and I would say not all of them were healthy or ideal, you know. I think my personality, I think all of our personalities probably play out, especially in the beginning when you're getting into healing or self-help or, you know, trying to repattern some things. You know, some of us are just like want to go balls to the wall, and some other people might just take little chunks at a time, you know. And I had developed this pattern of drinking from the fire hose and enjoying that process of just being on the edge, you know, because so much coming at you, you know, it's like, oh, you know, but it fills the space, and I like that, you know. I don't like boredom, and so I took the healing route kind of the same way, just going full on into it. And I think I started experimenting with the psychedelics probably pretty like in 2010. So I'd only been out. I got out in 2009.
Yep.
And so I had only been out a year, and I'd heard a lot of talk around, you know, different psychedelics used for PTSD. You know, there's even, I'm sure you've seen them, the documentaries about ayahuasca or whatever, mushrooms, specifically around veterans and PTSD. And I thought, I don't know, for some reason that just grabbed my attention. And I think probably because I was also in that existential kind of place of questioning truth, questioning, you know, reality in general, and kind of going inward and questioning like who I am, all my beliefs, you know, all my assumptions. And so I think psychedelics kind of drew me into that, like, hey, maybe this is something that I want to explore. The problem is I did it in classic Josh fashion and went balls to the wall.
Right.
You know, and I've learned with healing in general, it's just that's not how it works. Like you don't just get to like mind over matter it like a CrossFit, you know, workout or something, and you're gonna get that much farther. You know, it's like it's not how it works. And especially psychedelics, that's not how they work, you know. And I'm definitely no expert in them, but I think that kind of ripped me open is like a good way to explain it in terms of, you know, I mean, psychologists and people have always described the human psyche as an onion, right? layers and layers of the psyche. And it's kind of like, you can kind of, the idea is to maybe peel off layer by layer in a very nice, gentle way, and like, you know, work through each layer before you go to the next one. And I think if you push too hard into like psychedelics and even other practices that are meant for the mind, like meditation or whatever, you can like go too far, too quick.
Right.
Kind of, you can reveal too many layers to where you can't handle all those. You can't. It's too much to process. And yeah, I think you see a lot of that in the psychedelic culture. Is a lot of people that are blowing themselves apart in terms of like their psyche and energetically, and then you come back and you're like, whoa, like how do you integrate the fact that you just talked to some alien beings or something into your everyday life and to your mom who is just a regular old lady, and you know, how are you going to relate to anyone now? And I'm not saying I talk to aliens, right? I think just that's a lot of the bullshit that's spewed around psychedelics is all this nonsense around these experiences, which I think people do have, but they're misunderstanding what they are. And I jumped into that world pretty naively and also intensely until I got my ass whooped. In a way. And so that kind of clued me into, like, my first psychedelic experiences kind of clued me into, I guess, energy, you know, like I know the world around that is pretty wacky, and there's a lot of bullshit. But at the end of the day, you know, we know for a fact that we're electromagnetic on some level. And we're also physical, cellular, all of it. And it was kind of the first introduction to like, okay, there's some kind of energetic thing going on here. And then also nervous system, like deep nervous system, like unconscious stuff. Like that's when I realized, or kind of opened up to the world of the unconscious or the shadow, whatever. And that's where the work needed to be done. Like that's like, I have all this programming and circuitry that's really fucked up, that's not ideal for me anymore, but it's buried in the unconscious, I guess you could say. And the only way you can work with that is going into it. And you can't go into it like our normal everyday waking state, like using willpower. There's a bunch of techniques, right? And so there's EMDR, there's psychedelics, there's hypnotism, there's different types of meditation, there's all, and visualization. I mean, there's a whole world of like basically people using techniques to access what's going on under the surface, you know. And so that led me into body work, and really our friend John, he kind of introduced me to the world of body work. And I started with Craniosacral Therapy in Washington. And that's basically, I'm going to butcher explaining what it is, but obviously it's in the word. From the cranium to the sacral is your entire kind of spinal column. And I guess those therapists are dealing with it feels like the electrical circuitry of your nervous system through touch, and sometimes like a visualization, you know, and being in a relaxed state. It's really just putting you in a suggestible state, and that's what psychedelics do. That's on a very kind of extreme level, and then there's these other therapies that do it on a subtle level. And my first time on the table with a craniosacral therapist, I was probably crying within like 2 minutes of the session, and all she was doing was lightly touching me. And it was the first, I mean, it was such a powerful experience that I remember thinking like, man, this is what it means to lay hands, like that's described in the Bible when people would lay hands and heal. And I was like, Jesus, like there's something to this. I don't know what it is, you know, it's so out of the norm for me that it almost felt magical that someone could just barely be touching me, and all of a sudden I have this release. I cry, my body heats up, and then afterwards I'm like, my nervous system is relaxed and but also like exhausted because it's been hypervigilant and holding for so long, you know. And so that was such a drastic experience. But it's kind of like going to chiropractor. It's like one treatment's not going to really do it. It's like they gave you a taste of like, hey, here's what a better regulated nervous system feels like. Here's a little more balance, and then, you know, your patterns are gonna probably take hold again, and you're gonna end up in the same place, or maybe a little less intense. And so I started realizing, oh, this is where it's at. And so I did a bunch of craniosacral. That got me into some other structural integration, which is more addressing the tissues, like the fascia and all the connective tissue. There's a lot of research going on around that and how it's connected to the nervous system, and it also learns, it self-learns and corrects. And so the tissues can store, they're constantly adapting. So, right, obviously if you have an injury, like a physical injury, you know, the body's going to react, and you can have scar tissue, and you can have restrictions that follows. But that happens, I think, as well with psycho-emotional issues, energetic, if you want to get into that. But the tissues, I started to learn that the body is holding on to a lot of this stuff, the patterns, the memories, the guilt, shame, like betrayal, like rage, all of it's like residing in the physiology. And like you were saying, you were stuck in a lot of loops, and I was too. Still, I think I still go through loops of different things, but I realized that that's mostly mental. Like there's like this mental looping going on, but underneath the mental looping there's like a physiological stuff going on, like anxiety, and like the body's doing all this stuff, and you're so wrapped up in your head that you can't necessarily feel it or sense it that well. And then so the body work kind of helped me get into my body more, like get out of the head, like the politics and the truth quest of like who's right, who's wrong in history and, you know, in politics and whatever. Just get out of the storylines and just listen to what your body's saying. And it's like, oh, it's just fucking amped up like crazy, and it's affecting the way I'm thinking, and it's also just filtering my entire reality. You know, so I think body work was
like your mental state, like how it kind of like creep up, you know, like I didn't go from no PTSD issues to PTSD issues overnight, you know. It was like a gradual thing. Do you think it's fair to say it's kind of similar in the body? Like I know, like I went some time without working out and then try to jump back into it and realize like, oh wow, my body moves completely different because I haven't stretched in like a year, you know. So it's like the hip flexors are tight,
right.
my depth of squat's not as deep, and like that can also correlate to similar to what you're talking about, like just those negative built up in the body. Like it's not a small build up that goes from like no build up to all this, you know. It's like a progressionary thing.
Yeah, just all of that over time getting trapped into the body and not being able to deal with it. You start developing all these dysfunctions, you know, and it's like I think that stuff happens instantly. Like you were saying, that, you know, it's a gradual thing, but I think there's like the physiology stuff I think happens instantly and then gets trapped if you don't process it or if it doesn't get out properly. You can look at animals, and when they get into little skirmishes, or you know, they get into it with each other, they'll do it really quick, and then they'll go like shake. They'll do all these movements like shaking and, you know, maybe like huffing and puffing, kind of like and kicking the dirt. Like they get it out of their system, like physiologically. And I don't think we do. We're trained to like just be good little boys and girls and sit still and like don't react, and so you just store it. And so I had an experience like it's actually I was in Hawaii when I was working with you guys over there in Waimea. I found a way to do ayahuasca on the island, and I did a couple weekends with a woman who she's like a shaman, medicine woman. She's been doing it for 20 years, and it seemed legit. It didn't seem like such a wacky, group of people or anything. So, but I had an experience there where I kind of relived an IED explosion, which I was totally fine in. We were driving Jervs, and so it didn't rattle my cage. I didn't get a concussion from it. No one died, but it was just an IED explosion. And in the ayahuasca, ceremony, for some reason that just came up. And I never thought of that day as like a traumatic event or anything. It wasn't that traumatic, but for the body, I basically was shown, I guess, or was able to see how my body reacted to that blast or to that event. The tissues reacted, like when there's a loud noise, everyone does this. Everyone kind of flinches, right?
Yeah.
And there's studies done, I think, I don't know, it might have been post-World War I and shell shock and stuff, but they were doing studies where, they were kind of testing that flinch response in veterans who were shell shocked. And it was like their body, like the shoulders come up, like let's say, we've all been around or been on a fob, let's say, in the incoming, or not even incoming, outgoing. We're shooting 155s, but you don't know when, and it just goes off. If you were to slow that down and look at what is the body doing, and it's like all that fascia, all that connective tissue is reacting very fast, and it's putting the whole body into a protective state. Like when toddlers fall, for some reason, they always are able to stabilize their head, and they're just toddlers. It's like the body has these responses. And so when IEDs go off, well, there's what I experienced in the ayahuasca ceremony it wasn't just a physical, like a blast wave, which we do, they're pretty sure blast waves go right through the body. They affect the cells and everything. And who knows how much, but it was also like the intention behind that IED. It was kind of like showing me like someone tried to kill you. Like I didn't ever think of it like that. I was just like, oh, IED went off. Okay, respond. Okay, it didn't hit anyone, or it hit the fucking axle. We're all good. Move on, right? Not that bad, because hey, there's guys that are dead now, because of that. So close call, but not that traumatic. But it wasn't about the storyline of it being overly traumatic or not, or comparing that to a traumatic event of another veteran or a Vietnam veteran. I used to do that a lot. Like, well, we're not even close to being as bad as Vietnam, so suck it up.
I thought of that too, like D-Day. Like I can imagine like trying to storm people, and like at that level that when I always see my symptoms, I'm like, how can I say anything? I don't compare to that even remotely. And you're talking about the IEDs. Like I've never even thought of it until you said that. Like I always just saw the misses as like car accidents, like, oh, that sucks, let's just keep moving, It wasn't like someone's trying to kill
you. Or just a close call, but the body doesn't know that. It's almost like our minds can tell a story about it, and a lot of times it does that to protect us so we can just keep going, but the body's like blind in that sense. It's like, what the fuck, something just tried to kill me. That's what it knows, it seems like. And the tissues know it, and they react, and then I think those reactions sometimes get stuck and then develop into a pattern. And I don't know if you've noticed, I've noticed a lot of veterans develop a upper kyphosis in their back, which is that really rounding of the shoulders and the top of the back, the thoracic spine and the neck, like rolling, hunching over like hunchback.
Yep.
I don't know if you noticed that, but I've noticed a decent amount of dudes experiencing that. And right. And I have it still, and I'm actually just now starting to work with this and starting to release. Yeah, it's just that pattern is a protective pattern to kind of like go inward, maybe protect the vital organs, the shoulders rising up to protect the neck and the head,
right.
you know, and then that kind of unconsciously, constantly, that program, let's say, maybe running, those tissues are constantly putting themselves in that position because you haven't been able to like really do the work to say, hey, like I'm okay, I'm not in a danger, I can relax now. You can't just, it's almost like you can't just think it. You have to like teach the body it's okay. You have to like show the body that it's okay, and that you don't need to be running this hypervigilance kind of like program all the time.
Right.
But yeah, that kind of came from an eye.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Go
I was
ahead.
just going to say that it's interesting. Like you came to the same resolution in an ayahuasca experience when I was taking some random college class and did a paper on PTSD. And during that, I stumbled on a scientific journal about Israel, and Israel treats PTSD a little bit different than we do. They're a little bit more proactive. So when they had individuals go through a traumatic situation or an intense situation, what they do is some sort of attention training. And I kind of dove into that, like, what does that mean? Like, how does that make sense? And found something that was a little bit relatable to me and something that I enjoyed, which is jiu-jitsu. And that state of always feeling threatened, you know, that's threat avoidance. You know, we're always trying to avoid that threat. And I feel like jiu-jitsu really helped me in the sense of being able to back that up from avoidance to awareness. You know, it doesn't ever go away. And if I'm not like attentive, then like it can creep up and I'm stuck in avoidance all the time, like at the grocery store or whatever. But at least I have the ability and constantly practicing that to like step it back. But we'll just go back to your ayahuasca. So once you noticed that that's where you were at, what kind of things did you do to like implement change?
So yeah, just once again, that was, you know, so that ayahuasca experience was actually only maybe 3 years ago. So that was kind of relatively newer, but yeah, like I said, doing all the body work and all that has always been part of it. And then I think with that recent experience, it was just kind of a shift into more practical things. Like I'm getting like less, I feel like I kind of have run out the process of like the whole truth quest thing.
Right.
And it's just being really mental about it and just realizing, hey, there's just physical patterns. You don't have to tell a story about them, just cut and dry. Like you need to do some regular practices, you know. And I think, you know, being in the line of work we are in contracting and kind of moving around from job to job, not knowing, you know, when it's starting, when it's stopping, all that, I realized wasn't very conducive to developing some real solid practices or disciplines, you know, because in that process of unwinding, I think I became very undisciplined. And it was almost like a pendulum swing from being over disciplined, you know, like being raised Southern Baptist, super strict. I was always super on top of schooling, you know, doing my homework, getting good grades, you know, all that crap. And then joining the Army and just, it was constant discipline. And then I think when I started unraveling, it was just like undisciplined, like, fuck it, do whatever you want, kind of in a destructive way.
Right.
And kind of getting off into the clouds, you know, and to think, you know, all that stuff was part of the process. But now it's kind of like coming back down to reality, like, hey, you got to explore the existential, like spiritual the shadow, the unconscious, the wacky world that is, and like now you need to do what you probably should have done to begin with, which, like you were saying, you found some of that focus to help in jiu-jitsu, and it's like, honestly, that's probably where I should have started. That's probably should have something that been, martial arts should have been probably part of the post, military prescription, let's say.
Yeah, I think it should be
instead of just
mandatory for anyone that does anything in those career fields. But some type of that level of being like, hey, this is your mental state going from avoiding threats to being aware that there is a threat, because it's been amazing. And I can only imagine how helpful it would have been, like, to go from a mission to post-mission, you know what I mean? Being able to digress and having that ability then, and not be carrying around all that stress for years, and all that high intensity
yeah
stress. So what kind of disciplines and practices, like if you were to have like a perfect week, like is there a list of things that you would do on a consistent basis to like maintain like a healthy like mental state, physical state?
Yeah, actually, so I just kind of, and this has changed between contracts and not contracting.
Right.
I've kind of had to develop two different ways of living, depending on whether I'm working or not. And that's what's been actually so hard, is like, just uprooting all your maybe healthy habits that you're trying to do in order to mitigate, like, the symptoms, and then having to uproot, go to, I don't know, Hawthorne, Nevada, or somewhere out in the middle of nowhere that has, like a Walmart and a gas station,
Right.
and no gyms and no, just, those weird places we work, and so, but now I'm just kind of focusing on like trying to kind of up my my discipline or consistency around these things. And for me, like, I'm trying to implement meditation more, and that's something I had played with a lot during those other phases, but never took super seriously, and I was always kind of a little wary about the community around that, the meditation and all this new age stuff. Just a lot of it seemed off. It seemed, just kind of like Fruit Loopy. And I finally decided to go to a Vipassana retreat, which is a 10-day silent meditation retreat in Idaho. They have them all over the world, in all of the United States. They're a pretty interesting organization. It's all volunteer-based and donation-based, so you can kind of sign up, and technically you can go for free if you want. They just ask for donations later. But I decided, like, hey, if I'm going to try meditation, let's like really go for it. Go all once again, like, going all in, Right, but this was a little less. This one was a little less, like, I was aware of that pattern, and I went to this retreat like just last year, so I was very aware that I do like to go in the deep end and blah blah blah. But I was kind of learning enough about meditation to where people were alluding to the idea that, like, okay, you start a 15-minute a day meditation practice, great, that's going to be good on some level. But just the way we live our modern lives, it's going to be so hard to get to the levels of meditation that kind of really can provide some profound change in just 15 minutes. Even if you do it daily for 5 years, it's like such a slow, like, buildup of momentum, where a lot of the people that were recommending various types of meditation were like, hey, you need to go on a retreat, most, like, to really feel like what this does. You need to really put a lot of time in, kind of remove a bunch of stimulus from your life temporarily. So that's the whole point of going on retreat, is like, let's say you have a wife and kids, it's like, dude, you don't have time to sit for 10 hours a day and meditate and let yourself go into, whatever you need to go into. And so you can kind of go to a retreat, remove everything. It's silent. You don't talk to anyone there, which is what I like, because I don't want to go to like a retreat with a bunch of hippies and like, and discuss things, which I'm open to, but it's like our experience is so far from like the average civilian.
It's hard to find relatability. I find a lot with, normal people. So yeah, I totally get what you're saying. How overwhelming was it like the first day of that retreat? Because I'm like thinking about it, running through my head, and I'm like, I would be like, okay, I got to be doing some stuff, because I struggle with being still, and like having quiet time.
Right.
Like I meditate every day for the 15 minutes, and I've been doing that for a while, and I see the level of benefit that I was shooting for. It quiets my brain for the day. But if I don't do it every day, then it's not consistent. But I've always been curious about these 10-day retreats for sure.
Yeah, I honestly can't recommend it highly enough. I think so Vipassana is like a very specific form of meditation. It's like a school of thought that's like Buddhist based, but there's a bunch of ways and techniques on meditation, and that's why I kind of wanted to learn one, but in a very intensive way so I can really understand it. And Vipassana seemed like the least like market, like they're not making money off of it. They're not creating a fancy app that is making millions of dollars. Like it's donation based. It's, it just seemed honest, like, and no weird guru shit going on. No one's leading it really. There's like teachers there that are there to help if you have some questions about the techniques. But the ability to kind of just learn a technique without much dogma was great, because we're all coming from different backgrounds. I don't necessarily have a belief system that's going to oppose Buddhism. In fact, I explored a lot of Buddhism, during that whole existential phase, and found a lot of it to be pretty interesting and like pretty similar to Christian teaching, surprisingly, but the retreat just wasn't like dogmatic, which was great, and it just focused on the technique for 100 straight hours. You're doing 10, 11 hours a day, every day. And I would say the first day was not that bad. It was the third day is when it started kicking in for me in terms of just the uncomfortableness and the pain that arises. And I think by day 6, I kind of had a breakthrough. Like it reached its peak miserable state, and it kind of just, I guess what it allows you to do is slowly settle down those layers of the onion. Whereas maybe psychedelics just shoot you straight to the center, or shoot you straight too far, or opens up the onion completely.
The level that you take,
Right. So this was like a very slow dosed in that way, where you really layer by layer kind of went deeper and deeper, because all you're doing is focusing on the body. So Vipassana is very specific to the body. You're focusing, the first 3 days, you're just focusing on the area under your nostrils for 10 hours a day. And you're just focusing on the sensation of the breath going through the nose, because that's the easiest place to anchor on the body, because of the breath being automatic, right? You don't have to think, it just is happening. So you can sit there. And then once you gain enough concentration power, I guess, because you'll realize you'll focus on your nose for about 2 seconds, and then you'll have a thought. And then maybe that thought goes into a complete thought loop. And then 10 minutes go by and you're like, holy shit, I was supposed to be focusing on my nose. And I just went through an entire storyline about something. Right. And so that process of your mind looping is kind of I'm not going to say an addiction, but it's compulsive and just automatic, and it feeds off of the sensations in your body that come up. So what I basically realized on day 6, that all my thoughts were being fed by anxiety, and I found out where the anxiety started in my life, and it was started at birth, because I was born without my biological father, and my mom was a single mom who was extremely stressed out, and it basically defined anxiety for me, because I kind of sat there. I had so much time to kind of go into it. I was like, well, what the fuck is anxiety? I'm like, because if it's not all these thoughts, right? Because once the thoughts kind of go away, it's like it's in the body. And I was like, what the fuck is this feeling that's like in your gut? And I realized, like, for me, anxiety is a fear of the unknown, of the future. You're never like really anxious about the past. You know, you might get depressed about the past or regretful, but the anxiety is always an anticipation.
I'm sorry, I was just thinking the anxiety would only manifest from the consequences of the past. Like, how is this going to impact my future, kind of thing. That's interesting. Yeah, keep going. Sorry, I didn't mean cut you
right.
off.
No, so yeah, I mean, that's kind of one of the bigger, I guess, breakthroughs I had there, was like noticing where it came from, and then how it starts as a sensation in the body first, and actually kind of just almost my natural state since childhood, and then just got exacerbated, by the military stuff, training and all that. But you got to kind of see that progression from sensation, and then thoughts looping in order to feed that sensation, and it just keeps it all going. And when you starve those processes out, which is what you're doing by, hey, I'm not going to give my attention to that loop. I'm putting all my attention onto my breath right now. And then, later in the course, you end up moving that attention all over the body, and you're basically scanning every inch of your body from head to toe and toe to head for 10 hours a day. Right. So a lot of people think, there's different types of meditation. There's like the do nothing meditation, which is kind of like just do nothing and just sit and observe everything that's going on, the thoughts and it's kind of a more relaxed, passive type of meditation. And this Vipassana is more a concentrated meditation, and specifically on the body. And so for me, it just really helped realize like what's going on in the body and where it's coming from, and how fast that process happens from sensation to thoughts to thought loops to feeding it again, and then those thought loops turning into more. And that anxiety loop is what is just going to the point where it'll lead you to another, like anger, because after being in that state for so long, I think you're going to start getting agitated. And so it helped me kind of track the roots of where this is coming from. And because I got to track the roots, it's like I wasn't just managing the symptoms on the outer layers anymore. It was like, boom, direct insight as to where this is coming from and what you can do about it. And I still have anxiety, right? I still am working with these patterns, but something big shifted there to where, I started gaining weight again after that. And I think I was so skinny because of the anxiety. And if you look at a lot of guys like with my build, long, lean, lanky dudes, if you notice like someone that's like too skinny, it's like always like, or 9 out of 10 is a huge anxiety problem. It's almost like your body's eating itself and not allowing itself to kind of grow. Right. But just by kind of being able to track where this anxiety was stemming from and letting my breath kind of literally physically, your diaphragm can drop and relax a little bit. I think my digestion ended up better. I started gaining a little weight, and my anxiety has been reduced quite a bit, and I'm able to kind of see it creep up and not engage in the loops, which was really like a really awesome thing to happen, you know.
Yeah. Do you think it raised your energy levels a little bit too? Because I'm sure it improved your sleep and things of that nature too.
No, in the beginning, it was exhaustion.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Like a deep exhaustion, because it finally was able to rest.
Right.
Right. And so I was really tired, and I also had to go through the psychological kind of process of allowing myself to be exhausted and not do much. And like for a while after that, I was like, and I wasn't working after that. So I was like sleeping in till like 9 or 10 in the morning, which for me was like pretty late. And I if I were to do that, you know, in the past, there would be a lot of guilt, or, you know, there'd be a lot of fucked up self-talk around like,
Yeah.
hey, you need to get it. Some of our military stuff too is like, dude, you're being weak, you know. And you know, I had to kind of just let that go and allow myself to be exhausted and fucking sleep in. And like now I guess where I'm at now is like a place of recovery of like around stress, and realizing that I kind of had an addiction to stress, and then an addiction to releasing the stress. And I got into using weed for a while, and that was kind of like my main like dopamine hit / release that I was using to combat the high adrenaline, high cortisol state. You know, so it was like I was kind of addicted to it all. I was addicted to stress, and then kind of became addicted to relieving the symptoms of the stress, and none of that worked, you know, very well. Very inefficient, you know. And not to like talk shit on cannabis or anything, I think it helps in some ways, you know, and is an option for people. But what I found for me was like, oh no, this was just like something that felt really good because you were so fucked up, and it kind of temporarily changed your state. And now, I mean, if you just depend on that, I kind of learned the hard way, like, hey, this isn't fixing shit. This is just very surface level, like easing symptoms. And eventually the weed didn't even work because the root was still there. The root problem was still there, and the weed wasn't really doing shit, you know, besides making me loopy and like not give a fuck.
Yeah,
You know.
like
And
my
so
experience with weed, like it really helps me sleep, you know? Like I don't do it all the time, mostly because we can't in our industry, but when I do it to sleep.
right.
I enjoy the giggles, you know? I'll giggle, watch a movie, and then boom, in bed.
Right.
Mhm.
Yeah, and I look at all that weed and probably more closely, I guess, similar to psychedelics, in my opinion. And it's just a lot easier to use or misuse on a regular basis. So it's like I don't have I think it could be useful used on occasion for certain reasons. You know, especially if, you know, yeah, you want to maybe, yeah, it gets you into a certain mental state that could even provide some like insight into how you are. You know, it did for me. You know, but like I said, it was kind of a dead end, and I had to realize like, oh, I have to actually put in some real work
Right.
to make some lasting changes. But I think before I got to that point, I had to find a reason why, because I was so depressed. I was like, who gives a shit? Like, why should I better myself if I'm barely giving a shit about living or
Right.
humanity in general?
I was going to bring us back to hallucinogen. And is there any that you wouldn't recommend? Or like you spoke of a few bad experiences. Like I feel like anyone that's listening to this, like I'm not super pro or anti really anything. I made a comment on one episode about being anti medication or suggesting it was lazy, but I, I meant for me in my state, that's how I saw it. It would have been lazy to utilize medication forever. But like I feel like all of these things, if they're used with intent and not overused or like been like, okay, this is what I want to use forever kind of thing, because then I think that's when it gets problematic, like with anything.
Right.
You don't want to eat the same thing every day because you're not going to get the nutrients that you need from other stuff. You don't want to, drink every day, you'll die, like stuff like that. So
Right.
for me, I like to use, like, I've used psychedelics like maybe once a year, like, because I find it like super helpful to recalibrate as well as be like, I feel like it's like hyper introspective. Like it cuts out everything and you're stuck in your own mind sorting out your own stuff. It's a little bit colorful for sure, but that's my experience.
Right. Yeah. And yeah, I wouldn't, I guess I would, like you, I wouldn't like recommend or not recommend. Um, I just, I would just say maybe like really do your homework and research, or not research. It's a weird overused word, but just get into it, look into it, get all the information, and I would say like 95 or more percent of the culture around psychedelics is really off base,
Right.
and probably and dangerous for certain people, especially like dealing with heavy trauma. It's like it's like on the seriousness level of surgery, and I don't think we treat it that way. We just think, oh yeah, you just take some mushrooms at a festival and have a good time, and maybe you'll connect with God or something, or whatever the stories are. We'll talk to aliens and have a cool novel experience to tell your friends, or a lot of it's bullshit, and dangerous. And I think I got lucky maybe, or it's just my path was to be able to dive in and come out like relatively okay. But it easily could have went bad, like just the amount I did really, really heavy dose early on. That just shook me up. Like it took, like, I would say, a couple of years for me to process what happened with that experience, and so it's like, if you're going to hit it hard, you better have a plan afterwards, or not, I guess. Like I can't, it's like, how do you recommend it? It's like everyone's got their own decisions to make and stuff, but
starting from their own place, they have their own goals, what they want to achieve. It's just, yeah, I just wanted to be like you, be like, hey, do your homework, read up on it, see what the consequences is, what they're going to be of your actions, because with everything, there's a result that happens after you do it.
yeah. And so, I mean, it's a weird thing because I've had huge, profound, like, shifts and experiences from psychedelics, but at the same time, some of the most brutal experience, like brutal stuff to get through. And yeah, I can't say that I regret doing it or anything. I just look at it now and, like, for what it is, and go, man, that you kind of went hard, and you got lucky that you kind of made it out okay. So yeah, by all means, if someone
experience, like I just try to think of like how I can relate to that, and I can only think of like really maybe one or two. And one of them was I saw a truth about myself that I wasn't ready to see, and it took me like a month to like really be like, I was like, that's not who I am, but it is who I am 100%. I just wasn't willing to own it yet. And then the other one was,
right.
I went too hard into the paint also once. And after that experience, I feel like the way it was is basically I met the beings or whatever, and they did their thing and they told me this and that. But really, like, retrospectively, when I'm looking at it as like my internal dialogue to myself, it's basically like it showed me what I was afraid of, and I lived in that fear for what felt like hours, and that wasn't comfortable. But those are like my
Right,
my
but
views. Well, what were yours?
Well, and so what's funny is like everyone, like people talk about a bad trip or it being like negative, and it's like it's actually exactly what I needed. It's just,
Yeah.
it's just, man, I now can see where a lot of people have hesitation around it because it can leave someone completely destabilized. And that might be good in a way that it allowed them to access something really deeply rooted, but in the real world where you have to pay your bills and keep a job and relationships and all that, it's going to be hard to do both, and so it's like, are you set up in your life? Are you ready to do that? And if so, it can be extremely helpful. And I think going back to what you were talking about on being in a bad trip or anything, it's like I just think it was revealing super bad stuff that was within me already.
Right.
And until I was able to look at it and recognize it, it's going to stay there. And so a concept I learned a long time ago, I think it was from a craniosacral therapist, but she said something like, or maybe it was a book, but it said the medicine is within the pain. And that was another message I kind of received, I guess, on ayahuasca, was like, you cannot run from pain. Whatever the pain is, psychological, physical, emotional, if it's painful, it's trying to tell you something, and pain is the teacher. And avoidance of pain is just prolonging it and probably compounding it. And so it was like, I learned, like, a lot of times it's going to get worse before it gets better. And that's kind of the dangerous place, or the dangerous aspect of doing healing work with people. I mean, I haven't done healing work with people, but even just recommending psychedelics or something, it's like, you're going to go into the pain, right? And doing that can be super destabilizing. You can get sick. You can have physical sicknesses and reactions to it. You can become depressed for 3 months straight, and I think you're supposed to. But the problem is society isn't, our society, Western society, at least that's all I know, is not really set up very well to allow people to go through that process. And it reminds me of one of my favorite quotes is, it's no measure of health to be well adjusted to a profoundly sick society. And so I think that's something we get caught up in, is just trying to, especially veterans and civilians, like sometimes you might make the mistake of thinking that everyday civilians or society is healthy and balanced, and that you're trying to attune to that, and it's like, nope, they're just as fucked up. Society is just as fucked up. Most of psychotherapy is fucked up. And so it's like we're trying to do this healing work, but we're also trying to do it within a fucked up framework. If that's what you're thinking, if you're thinking everyone else is good to go, it's just me, a fucked up veteran, I need to align or attune to everyone else around me. It's like that's a lie. Everyone's society is really deeply fucked up. Humanity is, right? And so you kind of have to let that go and just go fully into it,
Yeah.
Maybe feel depressed.
Yeah, I feel like a lot of people try to be normal, and normal's defined by society, and normal's not a real thing. It's just it's an idea, and like I feel like we all have these goals that we're supposed to be achieving, these check marks we're supposed to be checking. And my experience through like my healing process is, what, that list should be defined by you, not others, and you should be doing what you want to do. Yeah. And I feel like when the harder you try not doing what you want to do, the more uncomfortable life is and the harder it is.
Right. Yeah. So I mean, going back to the idea of having a negative psychedelic trip or something, it's like, most likely it's gonna not be great. like most of my healing experiences that actually mattered in a real deep way, like a lot of them were painful, like uncomfortable, like highly uncomfortable. And I've been through discomfort, you know, like if I were to compare it to the discomfort of some of the selection processes I went through, I would say the personal development and like unwinding trauma and going into that world is way harder than anything I've ever done. You know,
Yeah, I would agree.
and
Because
yeah,
just to put it in perspective for those that are listening, I wouldn't say all of my experiences with psychedelics were negative. Like almost majority were hilarious, but I think that's because my mind is, for me, funny, you know, and it's like I get stuck layering jokes in my brain. And to me, that was great time, but all the experiences that resulted in me bettering myself in a direction in life, those were not funny. Those were very uncomfortable. My uncomfortableness, like, was during the entire time that I was on them, followed by a period of self-reflect, which was also negative, usually depressed because I wasn't certain what it all meant. So then I was usually stuck in a loop reflecting on that. But then at the end of that process, it resulted in a better me because I saw what I was doing in my current life that I disagreed with, or I was able to process some sort of situation in my past that I was able to like put away. You know, that was my experience.
yeah, totally. So I mean, yeah, it got worse before it got better, you know.
Yeah.
And I think as soon as you can get comfortable with that idea, and it sure helps to have like some support around that, and that's something I've had to navigate without, and probably a lot of veterans do. Maybe, I don't know. We're kind of a little different in terms of our contracting, you know, throwing us around everywhere. Kind of puts us into a situation to be a little more independent and
Right.
alone. But you know, that part is brutal as well. It's just to not have support in the real world, like the actual physical, everyday, normal stuff. It would have been nice for me to have more stability around that when I was going through this stuff. But us being like, I mean, I feel like I've been told I'm a high functioning, you know, like whatever that means. Like even if I'm depressed and fucked up, I can, you know, we can go on our UXO contracts or unexploded ordnance contracts and just do our job like blindfolded almost.
Yeah.
Because
Well, I think a lot of that's because it's really easy, you know, because we all, I feel like, are, you know, pretty intelligent people. So,
right,
I
it's
see
easy for us, but
right. I see a lot of people that can switch off they compartmentalize really well. So, like, they put all of this trauma, all this PTSD in a little box, and they're like, okay, for the next 10 hours while I'm at work, I got to be here at least 10% of my mind so I can function at a medium to high level for this industry. And then they just go do it. And I feel like that's why there's so many of us in this industry now.
yep, yeah, man. It's and there's part of it that I'm grateful for. I'm grateful that I got out of the army and had a way to make decent money without completely having to redefine myself and go to college and try to navigate all that, because I wouldn't have been able to do it. I mean, I started college right off the bat, and it was just, once all that stuff started unraveling, there's just no way I was going to get through college. But I could go on a contract and make money and do just fine, you know.
Right.
At least that worked. And then afterwards we're just coping however we were coping. And I was like smoking weed, you know, as like an everyday end of the day kind of ritual, just to sleep and like de-stress, and then wake up and just go back to work and then do all of that, you know. And honestly, it's not a good fit for my personality, especially I'm really active and adventurous, you know, and like weed, if you know, weed every day just slows you down. And that's kind of probably why I like it. It slows my brain down. My brain is just going too fast, trying to process too much shit. And this kind of was like, woo, slow it down. But as an everyday experience, it's like that started wearing me down, you know, not doing anything with my life.
Yeah. Do you feel like the meditation retreat kind of helped you slow your mind down a little bit?
Yeah. Like, well, it did. It created more awareness, I guess, around these processes that are always happening. And so, in a sense, it almost created some space and or some time between these things happening within you, like this. Yeah, the sensation, the thoughts, the thought loops. Maybe the thoughts lead to action, you know, and aggression. It's like it was a lot. It kind of if that all happened in a millisecond, maybe the meditation opened it up and it's like a second now. Like I can. There's a little bit of time in there where you're like, oh wait, I know what this is.
Yeah, that's what I try. My experience with meditation, and I try to tell that to others. Like, it feels like it gives me an opportunity to prevent an immediate reaction, you know. And I felt like previously it's because I was always at a 10, and then like I was able to de-escalate and be aware that I was being irritable before I was like reacting, you know. So I was able to indicate the body cues as well as you hit on it. I think briefly earlier too, you were able to see thoughts, like you saw ideas coming your way, but you didn't have to emotionally attach to those, which then would create that loop of actual action for that. And I mean, that's what it helped me with. So I'm a huge advocate of meditation for sure. I've never tried it at your level, but definitely going to do this 10-day retreat whenever I have 10 days free.
Yeah, I don't know, I've considered going again just because it's like a real convenient way to do it. Like, you know, if you were to go get an Airbnb for 10 days to like kind of do your own retreat by yourself, I mean, it would cost, you know, a small fortune to house yourself nowadays, and like kind of get away. But this kind of really provides, it starves out all your compulsions. Even around food, I noticed that even me, like I've never been overweight. I don't think I can get overweight, just the way my metabolism is or whatever. But I definitely have food addiction problems, you know, not like hardcore problems where I need serious treatment, but I noticed even that, like my like neuroticism and compulsion around food, you know, and stuffing my face before bed, you know, like always felt good. And realizing that food was like a soothing, kind of another soothing thing you learn to use. And at the meditation retreat, it's like you get 2 vegetarian meals a day, breakfast and lunch. And then at night you get a piece of fruit and tea. And so it kind of like, you know, you're like, Jesus, all right. And notice like, I wish I had all my comfort food, and like, you know, even if it's healthy, like I eat healthy food, but I'm eating it. Why am I eating it? And it was like, oh, you're just trying to deal with the like anxiety that you're experiencing. You know, so it's kind of just an interesting environment that would be hard to replicate, you know, really anywhere else. And yeah, kind of really, I think you go to a course, you spend that much time. If you really give it the effort, you're just going to it just helps understand what's going on instead of trying to follow a practice almost off faith, you know, because I mean, honestly, that's what you have to, if someone tells you like, hey, meditation is great, and here's all the things you can do, you kind of just have to take it on faith. I mean, yeah, you could read a study about it, but like you're just kind of like, well, I'm trusting even this study that this is what I'm going to get out of it. And there's like this kind of, well, I just follow the rules and you'll get there. And this was kind of like, here's your own exploration, and you can decide what you think about it.
I like that.
And yeah, like they do have some what they call Dharma talks in Buddhism. Dharma talks, I forgot what Dharma means. It's like just wisdom talks, like talks about insights, spiritual insights and wisdom and all this. And then also the technique of Vipassana. So every hour at the end of or every day at the end of the day at night, you do this 1 hour Dharma talk with the founder, who's dead now. So they just filmed it, and it gives you a little historical context as to like what meditation is and why, where it came from, and kind of like why Vipassana is the way it is, and you'll start to see like, oh, there's like all these different types of way to focus and concentrate the mind, and they all have different purposes, like, because some meditations, like transcendental meditation, is like to transcend, like it's not body based at all. It's actually getting you out of your body, which is actually what most people don't need. They need to get back in their body, and so it kind of just allowed you to like really feel confident in knowing what the hell you're doing versus just listening to a bunch of social media influencers and scientists. Everyone's yapping about it, but it's like, all right, I want to experience it,
No, I think it's great. So, moving forward, is there anything on your radar that you're looking to try in the future? Anything that interests you?
So right now it's I think everything is getting more practical. Like, so I'm working on, and I've been working on like my physical body issues for a while, like a spinal, like I developed a small, like a minor scoliosis, and all these kind of restrictions in my tissues just because of all the intense training, and putting on 100+ pound rucksacks during some of these trainings, and like, just all the tissue work is I'm kind of like trying to take to another level. Because for a while, I think I mentioned it earlier, I was doing a lot of structural integration, which is like massage maybe, I guess, but focused on the fascial tissues, right? So all the connective tissues that connect all the different muscles, and there's a whole theory into it, and it's super complex, but I did that, and it was very much positive. I even did that in Hawaii while I was there. I saw a wolfer there who I did like 12 sessions with, so they're basically breaking up a lot of tissue that is formed in these kind of patterns, dysfunctional patterns, but it's very passive, right? I don't have to do anything. I just sit on the table and this lady's going to work, right? But now I'm realizing there's kind of an active component to cleaning up your tissues, and also how your psycho-emotional state affects the tissues. So I'm really trying to work on like my breath. I know my breath is horrible. Like your CO2 tolerance, you can kind of test and see how you're breathing, and most likely if you have anxiety or PTSD and all these different issues, you're probably over breathing, probably over oxygenating, and then that constricts the tissues. And also if your nervous system is amped up, right, and the tissues aren't going to release as well, so it's like you can't just do the physical, you have to do the deeper work on the nervous system and stuff. So I'm trying to kind of do a combination of like the meditation and getting myself out of hypervigilance, out of constant stress, and then work these tissues out in an active way. So there's a bunch of different programs, and it's a highly arguable field, I guess, the field of biomechanics, which is loosely tied to like physical therapy, right, corrective exercise, that kind of world. So these training systems, I guess, take into account the entire fascial connective tissue system and base a lot of these corrective movements off that. And so it's kind of like using your own internal tension of different muscles to peel apart other areas that are stuck through movement, but very focused movement. So if you want to get an idea of like what that looks like I said, there's many different people figuring all this out, but one of the systems called functional patterns. They're online, they're on, Facebook and Instagram and all that. You can kind of get an idea of what they're doing. But I kind of just use their program to try to do my own at-home work. And it probably helps to get a practitioner. Like I saw when I was on a Tennessee job recently, I went to Atlanta to see some practitioners for one-on-one coaching, which really helped helped me realize that my rib cage was super warped and fucked up, which was causing my shoulders to be out of place and my hips and everything. So it's kind of like working through the tissues, but also having to do the psycho-emotional work at the same time. And so that's what I'm like really trying to focus on.
That's amazing. So I think we're getting close to the end of this, and I really appreciate it. But I just want to like one thing, like if you were to give someone who's just starting the process, like they're finally past that stage and being like, okay, I need to swallow my pride and I need to get started. What would you like if you were to like make a little cheat sheet, be like, these are the things that worked for me and that I wish I would have done sooner and in this order to like help you get to a better place? Do you have anything like that?
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of, I always feel weird, like trying to give advice maybe, because I know like my own experience was so my own, it was
if
like,
you were to give yourself advice for like as if you were talking to the younger version, you just got out of the army, be like, hey Josh, this is what you need to do.
Yeah, it probably would have helped me to have more information on a practical level of just the physiology of like what's going on. Like that's just me, how my brain, like I need to understand things and I need to see things. Like I like anatomy charts and looking at the nervous system, like, and how so I needed a certain amount of learning of like, why would I do this? Why would I meditate? Why would I work on my breath? That was outside of the spiritual kind of woohoo world, which I also explored. And I think that's part of it. I think that there is a spiritual element. And if that's too uncomfortable for you, you could just call it psychological. But I needed to have some practical reasons as to why to start doing some of this work. And it's like, I think if I were to have been able to recognize early on that it was all these thoughts and stories in my head that I was trying to dissect and analyze, that's not where it really was in terms of the work. Like I needed to go through that, but I also needed to calm the fuck down and just do some breathing. Like breath work is insane. What's cool is breath work's getting cool now, like, and not just in the spiritual community. It's like the sports and athletics world. Even Navy SEALs are realizing like box breathing can help kind of regulate the nervous system in an intense moment, kind of bring you back down, but if I were to do it again,
every time I get fired up, I just immediately go to, I believe it's a 4 count, 8 count, so it's 4 in, hold 4, 8 out. And then I do that 3-4 times and I'm back to normal, my heart rate goes down, the anxiety and the feeling of the anxiety goes down. I'm able to like think clearly, but that usually I only get to that stage if someone's being a dick, and that only happens at work. And, that's pretty rare, as well as like what you're saying. Like, I've seen the breathing get really big in jiu-jitsu. Rickson and Gracie just came out with a book and it's Breathe. I've tried to implement some of that into like my practices. I wouldn't speak high, I can't speak higher of it than it is. And hopefully I have this guy named I don't want to say his name until he comes on, but he does breathing techniques too, and I think he's going to come on and do one for the pod, and I think that'd be really awesome.
Yeah, that'd be good. I would say something about, I'm not an expert in breathing, techniques, but I do know that some of the popular stuff out right now, like Wim Hof style breathing, has its place. But I would say probably like for someone, if you're a vet, listening to the podcast, or just someone if you're dealing with stress, like, PTSD, right? Stress disorder or lingering effects of stress, that technique's a stressful technique. Like to overbreathe and over oxygenate is, you're kind of utilizing these stress systems within the body in order to achieve, right, a certain biochemical state and maybe even a state of consciousness. And same thing with like keto, like a lot, that's really popular, even, amongst like the traumatic brain injury kind of world. Keto is supposed to help with that or whatever. And I kind of got into that for a while, and then you realize like, no, these are all utilizing stress systems within the body that have developed to deal with stress, which is great. But I'm overstressed. I don't need to, over oxygenate myself and do Wim Hof because it's cool and hip right now. What I probably need to do is the more boring, frustrating work, which is CO2 tolerance and, breathing out more than I'm breathing in. And what you'll find is it'll start to, you'll just, I don't know, for me personally, I felt like my physical body kind of relax and drop. But if I were to tell myself, go back, I've been like, go to a Vipassana retreat, and get a good solid foundation in that. But at the same time, I'm like, man, would I have been ready back then? I don't know. But I would definitely recommend breath work and meditation. But be careful who you choose to, learn from. And just because I think there's a lot of like entrepreneurship surrounding healing in general, but like meditation and breathing, there's like, everyone wants to be a coach. Everyone wants to be an influencer of some sort and make money. And you got like a 25-year-old college chick who's, a breathwork coach, and you're like, yeah, cool. You might be on your own journey, but, people can screw people up, like thinking that their method is like a cure-all. But man, just slowing down and breathing and like understanding that there are things going on before you're even aware of that have already set you up to kind of fail. And you're never going to figure that out unless you slow down enough to be able to see it work and see how it works specifically in you. So the answer is not going to be in philosophy and, psychedelics and like, all this stuff I was doing. They all had a part and played a role, but it was like kind of opposite. I should have done the base. And if you look at old spiritual traditions, let's say, or whatever, they started everyone off on that similar stuff. Like, hey, work on your breath, work on like disciplining your mind, because your mind is like a little puppy running around everywhere, pissing on things and just going doing everything. You have no discipline in your mind. So maybe just start with that before you go try to talk to interdimensional spirit guides or something.
Yeah. No, it's very well said. If you were to, do you have any references or books that you read or anything that just jumps out that was really impactful for you in this process that you could recommend on anybody? I just read, I think it's The Angel and the Assassin. It's kind of dives a little bit deep into the brain and how the brain works, like the concepts of psilocybin. I don't know. It was an interesting read, but do you have anything along those lines?
Books, man.
Or
I
just
don't know. I
anything
don't
that
know.
jumps out, like documentaries. Like there was that fun one that came out about, I don't know, it was basically the demonization of any sort of hallucinogen back in the 60s and why they were demonized and stuff like that. Like I thought that was an interesting read, and kind of like, while I think some of the older generations will hear what we discussed and be like, they're the devils. And it's like, well, no, there's like, at moderate levels, I think it can be helpful, but not something I'd recommend for forever choices. But yeah, I don't know. Kind of just loot. It's my TBI right there. I just said the same thing I said earlier, but anyway.
Yeah. I can't say like a specific book, man. There were the only books that really like influenced me were books that weren't about PTSD or like the practical aspects of it or what to do about it or techniques. There were books that kind of helped me existentially like break through some things, and and it's like they're just
Sounds
so
like they're
random.
more
I don't know if they would.
personal application kind of books.
Yeah, kind of like, like, and I really, for me, I personally had to dissect like religion like quite a bit. I just was, because I was so brought up so deep into it, and so it's almost like there was a lot of knowledge, whether in books, podcasts, documentaries, that I was seeking and like filtering through for a long time, like an insane amount of knowledge. But I wasn't holding on to it. I was almost like I was using it to destroy all the false beliefs in myself. I was using knowledge to go, oh, that's actually probably true, not what I thought. And I use that regarding history, like history, philosophy, the origins of ideas in our society, culture. I mean, just all of that. And I can't point to anything specific because I wasn't trying to learn things to hold on to them. I was learning things. I was like unlearning, and I needed a certain amount of unlearning to happen before I could get out of my own way. And so I made a rule that anytime I came across information, whether it was a book or a podcast or whatever, documentary, I would, if it made me uncomfortable, I had to explore it. Because if I'm uncomfortable about something, I'm not understanding it. Because even if it's wrong and offensive and retarded, if I'm having an emotional reaction or whatever because of it, or an aversion, it's because I don't want to fully understand it. And so I don't know, that's not a book advice. It's just like, if you're gonna read books, if you're gonna do all that, just like, it's like in the world of healing, it's like you might be better off reading less. In the world of psychology and healing, like half of those people don't have it figured out, and they're just desperate to keep their job. And so, and I know a lot of vets. I don't know how many vets I've talked to that have gone to a psychologist and just had a horrific experience, and it's not because they were getting the person to really do some deep work. They sucked, and so it helped me to like lose the authority in academics and in knowledge and in science and just trust myself, and like read whatever the fuck I wanted to read, even if it's wacky spiritual woohoo shit, or if it's Darwinism, or Buddhism, like all kinds of stuff. I just allowed myself to explore, but never to attach myself to the ideas fully.
Right. No, I enjoy that process too.
But
just read whatever and see, be like, do I agree with this? And like figure out the reasons I do or don't, and then see if there's anything that's useful in that read that I can apply to life. And sometimes it's just no. It's like that was a complete waste of my time, but check it off.
I will mention one movie, and it's a book, and I haven't read the book yet, and it's been on my list. I just honestly not the biggest reader all the time, but the movie is called The Razor's Edge. I don't know if you've seen that.
1984, Bill Murray.
Yes, there's a Bill Murray version, and there's an older black and white version of it. And the Bill Murray one, dude, Did you? Awesome.
Yeah, like I watched the movie. I think John recommended it probably like 5 weeks ago. I watched it while I was flying to Phoenix, and then I ordered the book right after I watched it because I was like, that's pretty powerful.
Yeah. So I don't know, like that's like I guess a story that I hold, because of how relatable it is, because of the veteran aspect, right? Because the book's about a World War One, and Bill Murray coming back, just not knowing what to do, not giving a shit, and kind of. Well, I'm not going to go into it. You haven't read it, so.
I know, right?
But yeah, it's just. Sorry, I got excited. I was like, oh man, this is my book, but or my movie, but yeah, I would recommend. That was a good one just for veterans because it has to do with war, coming back, and that whole process.
Yeah, and I kind of feel like he was on the same journey that I feel like I'm on, Like, what's the purpose? And I don't know. I enjoy it. And I recommend it for anyone. Even though it's 1984, I feel like it holds up well. Like, it's not your typical Bill Murray's hilarious, but you can see how, like, I mean, he does put a bit of his humor on a really dark topic, I feel like.
Yeah, no, I that's why I like it, and I want to read the book because I know it's going to be more detailed and in depth, Um, but yeah, that's a cool one to explore.
Awesome. Well, on that, I'll wrap up the podcast. And yeah, I guess that's it, man. I really appreciate it, dude. Thanks for coming on. And with that, we're going to wrap it up. I hope you guys enjoyed it. There's some traditional things in there and a bit of unconventional things in there. So, trying to reach the biggest audience we can. And we're all unique and different. So, I'm going to look into just about everything that we can. What works for one won't work for the other, and vice versa. So, yeah, if you have any ideas, hit me up and we'll look into it. Additionally, if you're an organization or a veteran or first responder and you want to share your story, share what your organization does, or what kind of things that you do that are beneficial for you to improve the quality of your life, hit me up. You can hit me up on any of the social medias out there and looking to hopefully build a website soon. So, yeah, with that, we're going to wrap it up. Have a good one. Latest.